Okay, here we have a clip of a recent interaction between Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and a journalist who asked a question at what seems to be probably some sort of campaign event just before the election. Let's have a look and a listen.
Hello, Senator. My name is AJ Jones, WCMU local public radio station. I have a question about foreign policy.
Sure.
This week, the Israeli parliament passed a law that would ban UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee Agency for the Palestinians. The Biden administration opposed that decision. Now, I want to give you the floor here. Would a Trump-Vance administration support Israel banning UNRWA? And as a follow-up, would you earmark any federal aid for humanitarian causes in Gaza as the current administration has?
So, couple of things. First of all, of course, we want to save as many civilians, both Israeli and Palestinian, as possible. The most important way to do that is to end the war. And this is why I think that Donald J. Trump, I've never seen anything like it in American politics, where you've got the people in the United States who are a little bit more pro-Palestinian and the people in the United States who are a little bit more pro-Israel. I think they recognize, both of them, that Donald J. Trump is the best candidate because he's the candidate of peace and prosperity. And that's a big difference. When you've got a chaotic leader like Kamala Harris, when you've got a person where fires just spring up all over the world, everybody knows that it's the innocent people who get caught up in the conflict who suffer the most. We cannot have an incompetent leader in the Oval Office. We can't have Kamala Harris. So to your specific question, look, my understanding about UNRWA is that you actually have explicit connections to terrorists for some of the employees on the ground there, right? That's disgraceful. And that means that whether it's the entire organization or certainly some of the people on the ground, they have to do better at vetting their people so that you don't actually have explicit terrorist connections. Again, we all want to save Palestinian civilians. We don't want to support the terrorists on the ground who are killing innocent Israelis in the process, right? And I think those goals are totally compatible. Let's save as many Palestinian lives as possible, but let's not empower the terrorists who are murdering innocent Israelis. We can do both of those things at the same time.
Okay, so what I love about what Vice President-elect Vance does here in his response is he doesn't fall for this question that the reporter is asking, where the reporter, whether intentionally or not, I don't know, but the reporter asks a question and sort of puts a few things together, things that are not actually connected necessarily, or certainly not directly the way he puts them together, but he conflates things and puts them together, and J.D. Vance separates them out and makes it very clear that there are a number of different things here, and each of them, let's address each of them. Right? So number one, not necessarily in the order that he does, but when he says that maybe there are terrorist connections, that UNRWA has connections to terrorists, I mean, that's got to be the understatement, at a minimum, the understatement of a year, maybe the understatement of the decade or the century. I mean, there are many, very clear video evidence of many UNRWA employees, people who are on the UN's payroll, actively involved in the October 7th attack, going into Israel, hunting down, murdering Israeli civilians. Okay, that's something that there's clear video footage of many UNRWA members, employees, whatever you want to call them, workers, were involved. It's not one or two, it's many. Okay, maybe it's not everyone, maybe it's a few or a lot of bad apples. There was a Telegram, this was published somewhere recently, there was a Telegram group, a group on Telegram of 3,000 UNRWA teachers. UNRWA runs it's the United Nations organization for running the education of children in the Palestinian territories. They run the schools in Gaza, teaching the children. 3,000 of their teachers were in a Telegram group celebrating October 7th, celebrating a literal, actual, genocidal, barbaric, murderous attack on Israeli civilians by Hamas, including actual people who worked for UNRWA on the UN's payroll. And that was 3,000 of them in that group celebrating October 7th. They run the schools for decades. It's common knowledge. Everybody knows this has been reported on endlessly that the children that go to schools, they have textbooks that teach children from the youngest age. Children are in preschools, in schools run by UNRWA, where they are taught to hate Jews, to hate Israelis, to aspire to become martyrs, all just for the sake of killing Jews and Israelis. This is what they learn, the way they're raised in schools, in UNRWA schools that are run by UNRWA. So no, UNRWA doesn't have connections to terrorists. That's not an oversimplification. That is an understatement or a minimization of indescribable proportions. UNRWA is, in its entirety, I don't think it's an overstatement to say it is a anti-Jewish organization with literal genocidal interests and aspirations. And they're raising generations of Palestinian children that way in their schools on the UN's dime. Okay, it's not that there seems to be connections to terrorism. UNRWA is a barely undercover genocidal, anti-Jewish, anti-Israeli organization that is effectively an arm of Hamas that is funded by the UN. That's first of all. Then he goes on to say, well, we want to minimize casualties and deaths on the Palestinian side and also not support terrorism against Israelis. And he says these two goals are compatible. We can do both of these things at the same time. I mean, yeah, they're certainly compatible. I would take a step further and say they're not only compatible, they rely on each other. Well, I don't know if I would say they rely on each other, but the minimization of Palestinian casualties will be most effectively achieved by eliminating anti-Jewish, anti-Israeli terrorism. It's that simple. It's not like if you want to minimize Palestinian casualties, that's a reason why you should support terrorism against Jews in Israel by Hamas, by whoever, by the PLO, whatever it is, all of the above. The two go hand in hand. If you minimize terrorism against Jews in Israel, you are going to be minimizing casualties among the Palestinians. Very simple. They're not just compatible, they go hand in hand. When there is terrorism, there is war. And when there is terrorism and or when there is war, innocent people get stuck in the middle and they suffer and they get hurt and they get killed. It's that simple. It's not just that they're compatible, they go hand in hand by definition, naturally. And this whole, idea of getting, upset that Israel is, finally doing what they should have done a long time ago, which is banning UNRWA and officially, legally, whatever it is, or whatever the most precise way of saying it, boycotting UNRWA, banning UNRWA, whatever, however, is you want to describe it, to complain and say, oh, that's not fair, they're going to cause pain and suffering amongst Palestinian civilians because UNRWA is there, it's an official UN relief agency, and they're there to support and help the poor Palestinian civilians, and therefore banning them is wrong, it's immoral, whatever criticism people might want to levy against it. The most charitable interpretation of people getting upset about the ban on UNRWA is that they just got played by Hamas and they innocently and maybe in good faith bought into Hamas's optics that they've been intentionally engineering this whole time. And these optics are Hamas's primary game. This is what they do. They put women and children out front. They keep their leadership in the basements of hospitals. They store their weapons in hospitals and in schools and under children's beds in family homes and, in highly densely populated areas that are densely populated with women and children for these reasons, because they want to make it look like UNRWA is necessary and the Israelis are bad and hurting all of these women and children. And by saying, well, you can't ban UNRWA because we need them to protect the Palestinians, that's the game they're playing. That's exactly what they want. And at best, opposing the ban on UNRWA is playing right into that. UNRWA is effectively a branch of Hamas. It's terrorists, maybe not every single member, but the organization at an organizational level, the institution of UNRWA, absolutely, this is what the curriculums and what they have in the textbooks in their schools. And for anybody who feels bad about UNRWA being banned because it seems like it's, unjust or a bad thing and they're just trying to stop the civilians from getting help from a UN organization, sorry, you got played so badly. But thankfully, JD Vance didn't get played, and he says it exactly how it is.